Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am going to be talking about specifically the box journey and the playlist for the box journey. What are the songs that actually connected to each of the basic set boxes that were created for Dungeons and Dragons? And so let's get into it, all right? So basically, you have, just like there were 9 ring wraiths, there were 9 Dungeons and Dragons basic set boxes. And I've previously talked about the musical genres that were linked to each of the basic set boxes. So the reason why I'm talking about the box journey is more and more as I do research on the basic set boxes, and this has already been done, right? So there's already been like myopic research that was done on the basic box sets from the 70s and the late 80s and the early 80s. But that's where it stopped. And the OSR community, in my opinion, failed to look at the full arc of Dungeons and Dragons, because a lot of times there's some really wonderful people in the OSR. The guy who made Maze Rats, there's, just a whole lot. There's some really, Chalice and Chains is connected with the OSR. There's some brilliant people connected with the OSR, but I think it's a real disservice that all this super hyper attention goes on the early boxes, and people think that's where the boxes ended. Basic set Dungeons and Dragons boxes did not end in the early 80s. They've continued. And I think if you look at Dungeons and Dragons, you get this radiating Americana, signaler. Dungeons and Dragons is bouncing, radars of culture and idea and creativity into the Americana ether, and the Americana ether is bouncing back onto Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought this was the case when I started going down this road, and the more I, talk about this and think about this and research this, the more I'm learning this is absolutely true. And the playlist really, I feel, really opened my eyes to what the box set is. If you look at every single Dungeons and Dragons basic set box in context to where it lived within time in American history, you will see an incredible picture of Dungeons and Dragons, of game design, of creativity, of American culture, of American society, and it's beautiful. Like it's this expanding, almost like a map. And I'm not sure where the map will lead to, but I'm excited, right? So let me give you the playlist, all right? So if you look at every single Dungeons & Dragons basic set box, and you look at the year it was published, and then you look at the songs that were published in that year, I believe you see an echoing, brilliant playlist. You see one song in each of those years that perfectly captured the state of what music was like, that perfectly captures musically the state of Dungeons and Dragons in Americana at that very moment. What Dungeons and Dragons meant to its own community, to the American community. It's really deep. So let me start breaking it out. All right. It's 1974. 1974, Gygax Brown Box comes out, right? What is the song from 1974 that captures the state of Dungeons and Dragons at that time in Americana? And it is Bachman and Turner Overdrive. That's the group. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, right? Now, the reason why I think this song just really it perfectly captures it is essentially, I think this was, so at this point when in Dungeons and Dragons history, Gary Gygax had been dealing with these, essentially, wargaming communities. And in the 1974 Brown Box, he actually has a line that says, "This is something better." Like, he knew from the very beginning that what they were creating was way better than what existed. And so right there, he was like, I just really feel you're looking at, with 1974 Gygax Brown Box, it was Gary Gygax just, thinking and saying, I'm going to crack the foundations of the earth with this thing. This is going to change everything. And in many ways it did. For a lot of people, this changed everything. And I, so that 1974, Bachman and Turner Overdrive, you ain't seen nothing yet. All right. So 1976 comes along, okay? And now you're looking at the 1976 Gygax White Box, okay? Now, what was the one that what was the song from 1976 that perfectly captured the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons right then? And that was Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, right? And so this goes back to, again, these first two boxes come from Gary Gygax, right? And Gary Gygax was a lot of things. I could talk on and on about who and what Gary Gygax was. But one of the things he was a champion of fearlessness in our lives. And he had a vision of doing something that nobody had ever seen before. And he just jumped forward, like, into that vision, right? He was like, I'm going to slay every dragon in my own life. I want to create this game, and it's different than anybody else has created. I'm going to write and work hard and do this. Oh, in order to publish this and share this with people, I'm going to need to make a business. So I'm going to, spin up TSR, and I'm going to need to, push this forward. And so, at some point you see Gary Gygax flying out to Hollywood to work on a television show. Like he was just absolutely fearless. And so he was showing everybody, you don't need to fear the Reaper. You don't need to fear these monsters. You're going to go out and you're going to slay every monster in the game. And then with a whisper, he's like, and you're going to slay all the monsters in your own life as well. Like it was the subtext. And so Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, 1976 song that perfectly matches the 1976 Gygax White Box. Okay. 1977 Holmes Blue Box. Okay. Fascinating basic set box. Absolutely fascinating. Okay. So here's the song that perfectly matches the 1977 Holmes Blue Box. Blue Bayou by Linda Ronstadt. Okay. Now, the blue is on purpose in Blue Bayou. It's a sad song. It's a very sad song by Linda Ronstadt. A beautiful song, a haunting song by Linda Ronstadt. And so why is this the one that matches the 1977 Holmes Blue Box? Okay. So one, I think a lot of what was happening back then was subliminal, right? Like, I think everybody had an idea of where this thing was heading. But people also, were kind of frightened with how big this was going to grow, and they had reason to be frightened. We'll be getting to the 80s in a minute. And so, but I think the reason why the 1977 Holmes Blue Box was blue, right, was because Gary Gygax and his friends, Arneson and all those guys, right, they had been playing this thing in their basements for quite a few years. This was their world. They owned it. In 1974, Gygax Brown and 1976 Gygax White were still almost like in-jokes. They were like love letters written to this super tight community. It really was like, hey, dudes, let's play this game together, and it was like really kind of low, low scale and not, hadn't really reached its full scale. 1977 Holmes Blue Box, okay? Gary Gygax and TSR at this point, they're like, you know what? We got to grow up. We got to put on our big boy pants and make this thing a real game. And that's what they did, right? So this was really fascinating. So at this point, what they did was they said, we need a real professional writer. And that's what J. Eric Holmes was. He was a professional, writer and a professional game designer. And he came in and he cleaned up the mess, right? Like, it was like a D&D rule sets were like a bachelor pad. There was like pizza boxes all over and, beer bottles on the floor and like, nobody had vacuumed, And so that's what J. Eric Holmes did is party's over. We need to make this game for everybody. We need to make it clear. We need to make it look like a professional product. Let's do it, right? And so it was really kind of the party's over. Let's act like a real company, right? And TSR did. It really started to roll into its years as a real company. And at that point, in the 1977 Holmes Blue Box, the rules really belonged to the world at that point, not just Gary and his friends, not to the intellectual elites who could understand and reference and go talk to people. but everything you needed was in the box, and you could actually play it, right? It was really the first real solid attempt at the rules. And so Blue Bayou was kind of like party's over song, and it was a little sad, which that's okay. It needed to happen, right? But you're going to lament your bachelor days, essentially. And I think that's what the 1974 Gygax Brown and the 1976 Gygax White were. They were kind of the bachelor days of the rule set, right? Kind of wild and crazy. All right, and 1977 Holmes Blue is, hey, all right, this is a real thing. Let's do this. Let's make this a world product, right? So, really, really fascinating. All right, so 1981 Moldvay Red. Very important box, right? What is the one that captures it, right? In 1981, there was a song called Living Inside Myself by Gino Vanelli, right? And I think this perfectly captures the Moldvay box, okay? Because at this point, really, I think there had been a focus on, hey, let's make war games better by focusing on the character, right? Well, now at this point, you're talking, 7 years. This is 7 years after its publication, and it had been worked on for like 2 or 3 years hard before that, right? So you're really at a decade of Dungeons and Dragons play, or coming up on a decade of Dungeons and Dragons play. And what becomes obvious is living inside myself. This, I think, the 1981 Moldvay Red is an embracing that Dungeons and Dragons is so expansive and so large and so beautiful in that, right? Check this out, right? This blew my mind. This was an embracing by the game culture that that we can all live in as many worlds as we want. We can live in Greyhawk, and we can live in Planescape. Some of the worlds I'm about to list didn't exist at the time of 1981, but they knew they were coming. They knew they were coming. And just Faerun. And they were already living in Tolkien's world. A lot of people had used this to live in Middle Earth. Used Dungeons and Dragons to live in Middle Earth. And at this point, also, you saw these science fiction games, and they're like, hey, we can live in the Star Wars world. We can live in the Star Trek world. We, as geeks, and that term had a different meaning back then, but we gamers, we geeks, we are limitless. We can live in as many worlds as we want, as long as we respect this and we respect this, right? And we are not like the rest of the world. We are not limited to one world. And living inside myself really captures that. It captures that idea that our world goes beyond this physical world and this corporeal world. Our imaginations and our heart allows us to live in multiple worlds. And I think, in 1981 with the Moldvay Red, you saw that. Like, you really got a sense of that. And I think, Gino Vanelli's Living Inside Myself perfectly captures this, right? All right, so at this point, you move on to 1983 Menser Red, okay? This is the iconic D&D box. This is the red box. It's got it's got like this barbarian with a sword coming right at the fangs of a dragon, right? And so what is the song that perfectly captures the 1983 Menser Red? Well, I will tell you right now, it is Absolutely True by Spandau Ballet. And the word true here is this was D&D in its truest form, okay? And the reason why, it was unhindered by modernity. It was really unhindered by modernity. So in 1983, you had 12-year-old boys and girls getting together and playing this thing in their basement. You had 45-year-old dudes getting together with other 45-year-old dudes, and and really like busting into massive, detailed, down and gritty Dungeons and Dragons, right? Just like, we have this rule set, let's build campaigns, let's build worlds, let's do adventures, let's do everything this game can do, man. Let's this is taking the Formula One race car out and just blowing out every gear and going full speed, right? And the nice thing is that's happening today. Okay, people are still doing that today, but it doesn't mean as much, in my opinion, as it did for the true 1983 Menser Red. And the reason why was back then, you didn't have a million awesome books. You didn't have a million awesome movies. You didn't have a million awesome animes. You didn't have a million awesome television shows, right? You had 100 great items in each one of those, right? But now we have reached a point in society where we have so much that, we live in an age of abundance, particularly in creativity, that there are so many things that are pulling attention away. It's hard to get a really dedicated group of people to just sit down around the table, smile at each other, be able to, knock the other guy, in his arm and, tousle somebody's hair. This was the days, man. Like, and now, in my opinion, we see that, right? But often these people are, they could be, you could have 4 people who love each other and love the game they're playing, but they could be thousands of miles separated. They could be separated by time zones and a million other things, but not in 1983, man. And like, this is the game in its truest form. This is a game in its, in one of its most beautiful guises, in one of its most beautiful forms. And it was special. It was truly, truly special. And I'm not kidding. I thank the Lord, my God, that I was born in the time I was, because I remember those days. They were amazing. And the game is great now. And the game, I feel like there's a little bit of shine taken off the game today, not because Dungeons and Dragons is as great as it ever was, right? But the world is fundamentally different. And I think we've lost a little bit of closeness as humans. I think we can get it back, right? But right now, we need to start working on escaping screens and a million other little things. And so I really feel Spandau Ballet's True really just speaks so perfectly to the 1983 Menser box. So that is the best one that fits that. All right. So at that point, you move to the 1991 And so the 1991 Denning Black. Okay. So the 1991 Denning Black now all the boxes that I just talked about, they're all 1E. 1991 Denning Black is moving into the 2E. Okay. And here, I think the perfect song, the 1991 song that absolutely perfectly captures it, is "Can't Stop This Thing We Started" by Bryan Adams. Can't stop this thing we started. So true. So like, it's so amazing how this fits, right? So, because 1991 Denning Black, what did we just get out of? We just got out of the 80s satanic panic, right? And so people tried to stop this thing they had started, right? And, there was literally groups that were started to stop Dungeons and Dragons. And 91, this thing was just rolling like a steam engine, man. Like, it was like it could not be stopped. It had locomotive force, right? And people had said, hey, we understand that, this is, everybody's playing this game. A lot of people are playing this game. And some of those people have problems, and those problems aren't connected to them playing the game. And so we had moving past the satanic panic, and Bryan Adams, Can't Stop This Thing We Started, perfectly matched what was going on with the 1991 Denning Black box. It was perfect. Okay. At this point, you jump all the way to 2006. 2006, right? You go to 3E, 3rd edition, and you're looking at the 2006 Tweet Black 3rd edition box. What song in 2006 perfectly matches this box? I'll tell you right now, it is Ludacris with Pharrell, okay? Moneymaker. I kid you not, man. Moneymaker. And man, did that describe 3E, all right? 3E was just like this, right? It was just like, what? And the thing was, we're not talking about Dungeons & Dragons making money, right? That's nothing. Dungeons & Dragons have made money from the gate, right? Like Dungeons & Dragons, everybody like, boom, Dungeons & Dragons. We are tabletop role-playing game. Dungeons & Dragons had always made money, right? So what was special about, why am I using Moneymaker here? It's because it was on, the 3E was on the OGL, the Open Gaming License, right? And the OGL was like, this is our world, Dungeons and Dragons, but you guys can live into it. Make your books. You can make your books in our world. Go at it. And people did. They went crazy. And so there was all kinds of third-party publishers who were making money, a lot of money, air quotes TRPG, a lot of money, for themselves, which was really awesome. I mean, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things that Dungeons & Dragons ever done. Okay. We move to 2010. The 2010 Hainshu Red. 4th edition. Uh-oh. Right? 4th edition. All right. Now, what is the song that perfectly matches the 2010 Hainshu Red box for 4th edition? Well, you guys know what happened with 4th edition. There's debate on whether that was a good game or not, but what no one can debate is it absolutely sundered the community, and it was the dark days, right? So the song that perfectly matches the 2010 Hainshu Red box is Maroon 5, Misery. It's like, it just perfectly captures where we were at that time. It was a dark time. It opened the gate. It opened the door for Paizo to come in and create Pathfinder and eat Watsy's lunch for 6 years. It was dark, and people were fighting over it. People were saying, hey, this is a great game. Come play with us. And, old grognards were like, I'm not playing that video game. It was dark because, and it wasn't dark because it really wasn't about the 4th edition rules. It was about the community fighting over the 4th edition rules. And it was Misery. Maroon 5's Misery. All right. 2014 Merle's Green Box. Okay. 5th edition, right? You've had 6 years of, you went from 2008 all the way up to 2014, which was, it was like 6 years of, it was bad. It was like, you had 6 years of 4th edition. And so you're like, what are we going to do now, right? And what we did was, and actually the song that perfectly captures the 2014 Merle's Green Box is Sam Smith, Stay With Me. And that's what 5th edition was. It was Mike Merles solving every 4th edition problem with the most beautiful version of the game that had ever existed, bringing back the community, everybody kumbaya, and Stay With Me perfectly captures what Mike Merles did and what 5th edition did. And that is the Dungeons & Dragons Box Journey playset. Thank you.